Sutter has kind of an underrated shot. I mean, he can really fire the puck, and with the way Bill Bennett can pass the puck and find Sutter when he's open, it's just a combination that's working. So, listen, Bennett was drafted to play with Malkin or Crosby, and especially with Dupuis out now, the Penguins need at least one top six winger. I think we can all agree on that. Maybe even two, definitely one, and it would make sense to give him a look there, and I think he will at some point. But boy, the Penguins are a better team if you can keep those two together on the third line and still have Crosby and Malkin on the other two lines. It just sounds like a deeper kind of lineup that I think would be helpful in the postseason.
You bring up top six, and we've been talking about that since July 1 and way back, forever. This top six forward that we're missing, are the Penguins a stronger team if they go out and get a winger for those top two lines, or are they a stronger team if they have a top nine and they really have those three lines that are clicking the way that they are?
That's a great question. And, we all talk about them needing to go out and get a top six winger. But if Crosby and Malkin, play the way they're capable of playing in the playoffs, which is something, frankly, they haven't done lately, then the Penguins theoretically are better if they just have a deeper hockey team. When they won the Cup in 2009, Malkin's line mates were Ruslan Fedotenko and Max Talbot. Are those really what you think of as top six wingers? I don't think so. But you had Jordan Stahl, Matt Cook, and Tyler Kennedy as maybe the best third line in hockey. So if you look at it from that standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. And with this Dupuis injury now, it's really fascinating to me to see what Jim Rutherford does. Because Pascal Dupuis, there's sometimes a debate about whether or not he is a top six player. Well, I'll tell you what he is. He's one of the premier penalty killers in the league who happens to score 20 goals a season. There are very few players in the league who bring that to the table. You don't just replace that. And last season, in fact, the Penguins, I think with Dupuis in the lineup before he was hurt in Ottawa, their penalty kill, I want to say, was around 87%. But it was about 79% the rest of the season without him. That wasn't a coincidence. They really missed him from a defensive standpoint. So, do they need a top six guy? Ideally, yeah, they could use one, but might they need another just kind of role player at forward to kill penalties and chip in some goals here and there, just to try to replace what Dupuis did? Yeah, they might need that too. So let's just see how willing Jim Rutherford is to mortgage some of the future, because the Penguins are in a situation where the Eastern Conference isn't very good, and they're the cream of the crop perhaps in the East, and you've got Malkin and Crosby. So it would seem likely that you would be aggressive to try to make this team even better, but I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. And if I may say one thing, a lot of people are gung-ho on the idea of trading Paul Martin because he's going to be a free agent next summer and it looks like he might not come back. I think it would be crazy to trade Paul Martin unless you're getting like some absurd return, because if you're serious about winning the Stanley Cup, you don't trade a defenseman who's that good.
And what kind of defenseman are you going to command on this market? Because that's a high buying price, and if what you're selling is another defenseman, you're probably not going to be pulling in anything close to what Paul Martin has to offer. I'm really glad that you brought up 2009 and Malkin's production then, because to me, I think that as a hockey player or in this game, you tire mentally way quicker than you tire physically. And I think that's one success that the Penguins were able to have in 2008 and 2009 with that three-center system and with Jordan Stahl clicking as well as he was, because teams weren't able to just say, okay, 87, 71, and then sort of play okay the rest of the time when everyone else is out there. They had to, when you have another third line that comes out there, that's that much more that a team has to focus on something else, whether it's dedicating certain players towards defending them or whatever. But I think it really opens up space for those players, even though they may not even be on the ice at that time too. So I think it almost looking back on it, because Ray Shero was the master of always like painting the image that things were really nicely in control, and I don't think we saw the chaos that was going on, and it really became sort of obvious at the end of last spring. But when Shero lost control, may have been, or when he started to, was when that Stahl trade went down, which was coincidentally with Jim Rutherford. But the team really never was the same after that.
Oh, that's an interesting point. It's funny when you look at the Stahl trade. I don't think Shiro did a bad job in terms of the return that he got.
No.
I don't think that was the problem. But the Penguins, however, from that point on, those next 2 years, they were far more about style than substance, weren't they?
Yeah.
And that doesn't win Stanley Cups. That doesn't win in the playoffs. Especially, I look at the lockout season. That team, my God, it was a bunch of rock stars on that team with, Crosby, Malkin, Neal, Kunitz, Ginla, Morrow. I mean, and future Hall of Famers all over the place on that team. But there just wasn't enough substance. There just wasn't, and that's why a lot of people have asked me about this current team. They said, we've seen this before, great in the regular season, and that's true. But I see something a little different in this team. It just has a different feel, and I don't know if that's because Jim Rutherford made this a deeper team in the off season, or because of the coaching change. Maybe a little bit of both. But I think there is a little more substance to this team, and that's just one more reason why it's so upsetting for them that Pascal Dupuis was injured. Yeah. Because boy, he it's the guy you can replace in that regard, really. He just brings so much substance to the table. So, like I said, I don't know what Jim Rutherford's going to do, but I think he will do something. But just how dramatic moves he makes from this point on, I don't know. But one good thing for Jim, he certainly doesn't need to rush into anything because they're going to win this division. There's not really any doubt in my mind.
Yeah. One thing that's surprising me, I guess, is Jim Rutherford seems to be a lot more involved in certain areas or proactive in tune with the players than I thought he might be coming in. I mean, we knew that general manager and being a hockey mind and all that was not going to be a question. But like the changes to the travel regimen, and I didn't know about this until last week, just how much different it is this year to last year. Is that something, because I haven't heard necessarily from you, but is that something you're picking up on?
Oh, yeah, there have been a lot of subtle changes, maybe not so subtle. They're on the road a lot more, I'll tell you that. Early in the season, there was a road game in Toronto, and they just basically stayed and partied in Toronto for a couple of days at the rookie party and everything, and everyone had a good old time. And there's a lot of trips this year where they just spend the night in the city where they play and then fly home the next morning, and that's actually something that Mike Babcock started years ago at Detroit. He just thought it was stupid to be on an airplane at 3 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And I see some logic to that, I think. And, yeah, Rutherford, it's funny. I think older people maybe, we look at them and just assume they're not open-minded because they're older. And in the case of Jim Rutherford, here's a 65-year-old guy who is very open-minded, listens to his players, I think, has a great relationship with the coaching staff from what I've been able to ascertain. And, he's just he kind of rolls with the punches, this guy, and just doesn't seem to get rattled by anything. And I have nothing but good things to say about Jim and his interaction with everyone. He's a pretty easy guy to like.
I think we get a little bit of that from Mike Johnston, too. And he's another guy who's older and significantly older than his predecessor, Dan Bylsma. But it's almost like he's not threatened by new ideas. Like if you're a new guy and you're trying to prove yourself, something new that goes against what you're trying might be going against you trying to prove yourself. What I'm trying to say here, I guess. Whereas Mike Johnston, he's seen it, he's done it, he's willing to listen a little bit more, at least in the public eye.
I totally agree, and I would say that what I've noticed more than anything about Mike Johnston so far, he's remarkably comfortable in his own skin. Mm-hmm. And he just really is. He's not trying to impress anyone. He's not trying to make friends. He's not trying to make enemies. He's just being himself, and I don't think he feels like he needs to be the dictator. This isn't like John Tortorella demanding how everything will go. I think he's open to things, but at the same time, he's kind of firm. And once he has his mind made up, he doesn't waver. And that was one thing about Dan Bylsma. I have a lot of respect for Dan. I think he's a good coach, and I think he'll have success again in the NHL. But Dan wanted everybody to like him. And it just got to be too much at times. And then Mike Johnston, I think, is just more comfortable in who he is. He's been a coach for a lot longer than Dan, and I don't care what level of coaching we're talking about. He's been a coach for a really long time, and I just think it shows.
Does it feel like Mike Johnston's team yet? Like when you walk into that room, is there still a lingering presence of Dan Bylsma at all, or is it very clear that this is Coach Johnston's deal?
Oh, boy. I think it still lingers a little bit. I mean, it is his team, but, yeah, Dan's name still comes up sometimes, and Todd Reardon's name still comes up sometimes. I have an article, not sure when it's going to run. It might even be tomorrow, but I spoke with some of the penalty killers, and they made it clear to me that, some of the things Gary Agnew was teaching them at first they didn't really like because it was opposite of the stuff Tony Granato used to coach on the power play or on the penalty kill, and they weren't comfortable with it. They liked the way Tony did it. They always had success with the way Tony did it. And, finally Paul Martin told me we had to come to kind of a compromise with Gary, and finally they came to an agreement on how they were going to do things, and Gary, didn't tell them what to do. He worked with them and understood the situation, and now they've killed, I think, like 51 of the last 53 penalties or something absurd like that. And everyone seems happy. So is it Mike Johnston's team yet? Is it his team yet? It's getting there. I don't think that's something that happens overnight. But I do sense that these guys really do respect him right now, and they're playing hard for him. And the more time goes on, there's more and more of a sense like, nobody knew who Mike Johnston was at first, but maybe he knows what he's doing.
Any new holes in the Penguins locker room? Say Rick Tocchet-size fist hole.
No, and the funny thing about that, like Rick actually made a joke about it the day he was hired. I said to him, Rick, you're supposed to be the dictator now. And he said, yeah, I guess I'm supposed to skate out on the first day of practice like with a big stick and start beating people. And he kind of laughed about it because even though I guess that is technically his role, Rick's kind of a player's coach too. I mean, I think all of these guys are. And hey, when you're 13-3-1, you don't have to lose your temper all that much. So maybe the time will come, but so far so good in that regard.
Okay, Josh, one last thing. What do these teams have in common? We've got Toronto, Montreal. No, let me start over. Toronto, Washington, New Jersey, Florida, Philadelphia, Carolina, Columbus, and Buffalo.
What do they have in common?
Yeah.
Wow, I don't think any of them are especially good except maybe Montreal, but
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, you're hitting on that. I think I can.
Am I onto something?
Because for some reason I said Montreal instead of Washington the first time.
Oh.
Yeah, they're all the non-playoff teams in the Eastern Conference. Are there any of those names that surprise you? Obviously, Buffalo is not one of those.
Well, I really think Columbus deserves a mulligan because of all the injuries they've had. That said, I predicted they might take a little bit of a step back this year because I do think they're on the rise. And I still think they will be long-term, but I think people were a little too excited about what they did last year in the playoffs. I still looked at their roster and didn't look at them as a Stanley Cup contender to that point. The one team that will remain interesting to me is the Washington Capitals. I viewed them as the X factor in the Eastern Conference going into the season, and I still kind of do. I don't think Barry Trotz is going to work his magic overnight there. And maybe they haven't been real receptive to him. But I still think there's a good deal of talent on that team. And the Eastern Conference still stinks. And I don't know if you want to play them in the first round if they sneak into the playoffs. I just, there's still Ovechkin and Backstrom, a lot of guys who can score goals on that team. Trotz does know how to coach defense. I think maybe that will come as the season goes along. Then again, it wouldn't shock me if they just flame out and don't make the playoffs because that's the Capitals. You never know what you're going to get from them. But I think they've been a little disappointing.
Washington's on my list too. They're kind of a team that I think will probably have a strong second half. Almost the way that I felt. I didn't think that the Penguins would be sitting in the 9th spot or 10th spot or anything this year. But I don't think I quite thought that they would come out of the gate with this kind of success either. So
no, nobody did. Yeah.
I think Washington's stumbling in a way that I thought Pittsburgh might under a new coach.
No, I agree with you completely. I didn't expect this start at all. I thought there would be a real learning curve, and the Penguins' schedule wasn't horribly easy in the first month either. So, no, and it's really early to project this. But if you just look at the schedule the Penguins have coming up, and just knowing that they're in the Eastern Conference, we'll wouldn't be shocked if they make a run at the President's Trophy this year if they can stay healthy the rest of the way. They just kind of have that look about them right now.
They're so